Wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Esoteric Radio. Today is Sunday, September 18th, and you are tuning into the show titled The Universal Mother, which is definitely going to be quite a show. And I guess we're just going to get right into this, but before we start, I want to let everyone know that we're also available on live stream, which is www.livestream.com/Understanding, and you will actually be able to see the pictures that are associated with what we're talking about on today's show. Today's show is very expansive, and it'll actually cross over probably into at least 2 to 3 more shows because of the information that must be presented and must be shown in exactness. And of course, for that is that I first wanted to just basically tell everyone that I didn't create this universe. So do not direct your anger at me. I'm just the person that has to deliver the message. I have to accept the message just like you have to hear it, and then it's for you to decide whether it's truth or not. The only thing that I've done for the last 5, 6, 7 years, really a lifetime, but strongly for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been searching for the truth. Because I want to know why I'm here. I want to know what my boundaries are, if I have any boundaries. How can I get other places without just imagining that I'm there? Are there other beings that think like me? So all these questions I attempted to answer with starting the Resistance and starting the Wholeness Foundation and writing the Code of the Matrix, etc. By sharing what I have discovered at that point, it allowed me to keep discovering and allowed me to keep getting information that is pertaining to what I'm looking for, because there's one basic principle here on this planet and in this universe. Whatever you give out, you will get back. And this is very simple as a person, if they only understand it now, is making an investment. If you make a good investment, then you will reap a return. So the same thing goes with spiritual knowledge. If you invest in spiritual knowledge in the good way, then you will receive good things in return. But if you invest it in the negative way, then you will receive negative things. And so, of course, because the world has jumped on the spirituality like it's a bandwagon, many people, especially in the Western world, then they're now reaping the bad side of how they've looked into spirituality, meaning that many people have been looking into spirituality to see how they can mesmerize people and rule over people and to attract girls and all these different things that they may be looking to use the spirituality for, besides getting them into a higher state of consciousness. And so the results of looking into it that way has been a lot of people believing that much of this information as far as doomsdays is concerned is true, when in fact it is not, because there is knowledge that precedes what they're bringing out now that has always reigned superior over it, because it only predicts this time that we're going through a confusion. It predicts beyond this, and it also predicts before this. So I wanted to say that the knowledge of how to expand into all there is was found out 20,000 years ago. So you can only imagine in that 20,000 year period how much stuff has been come up with that is just not the truth. And I have a very easy analogy for this. If you pick up, let's say, a 20,000 page book, and the truth happens to be on the first page, you may read the first page and be in complete agreement with what you're reading, because that's what truth does. But you always must be aware that the moment that you turn from the page 1, if the truth can only be found on that page, you will have to now go through all 19,999 pages before you maybe look to the first page again. So that's kind of how I explain not only my life, but also many of the lives of the individuals that have been around me that have been searching for higher truths, as it's called. And now I've watched, basically in this esoteric field, many people still continue to go in one direction that they know leads nowhere, because they're afraid to say what they discovered once they got in there. They're afraid to make their own decision now, because that's what we were talking about. People that are around you can sometimes stop you from making decisions that you need to make, because if you do it, they will see the change in you, and then they will immediately come to you and say, yo, you changed, you need to change back, or I don't like this character. So that's called the crabs in the bucket. Really, they're more like shells. So the reality is that when knowledge is always coming, you're always changing. So never let anyone hold you back from change, especially if you discover the truth to things and you can see that clearly you were not in the truth before. You were only in parts of the truth. And that gets us into today's message. Today's message is the Universal Mother. And so the first thing the Universal Mother wanted to be for everyone to know is the difference between the Universal Mother and woman. And this is simply about one thing which woman can definitely also agree, is that woman brings forth man. The universe brings forth man, woman, plant, animal, insect, demon, vampire, you name it. So if woman wants to compare herself with that, then she has to understand that the reason why the Universal Mother can host all of those beings and be in harmony with all of those beings is because of something so grand, one cannot explain it. They would have to experience it. So, as we see, the master fractal that exists on this dimension is the Vesica. Because man comes from the Vesica and woman comes from this Vesica. Now, woman may easily say, that's my Vesica, though. Just like man may say, that's my phallus, though. But that's where they're mistaken. And that's how our bodies are actually split up, is that our main your genital or your fecundating component actually belongs to the higher beings. It is the correspondence to them, because all they're about is reproduction. So this is one of the biggest things that we can ever find out, is because we really need to now let everyone know that why people have been wanting to know where the masculine God is, the one that is jumped up in front of everything in their books and things. I am God, and you will have no other gods before me, and I am a jealous God. Now, the only way for God to be jealous is if there happens to be other gods. And on top of that, if that God happens to be, especially by that term, God means Yod, this means flame, and there were many sons of the flame that like to spout off these kind of remarks, mainly what was known as the being Sabaoth, or the Demerge, or Shaddai, the shadow, would spout off these remarks. I'm the one that created everything. And the reason why I would make that statement is because the original seed came from the Father, just the seed. But I want you to look very closely here. So, of course, when this being says certain things like that, the Universal Mother immediately becomes offended because, of course, she even brought him into existence. So there is an inclination that is within us all when we are especially small like children and we're fearless, that we have control over all things and control over ourselves. But as we continue to go on, we see that that control is more of universal. And we started to look deep into this. I personally and the people that are around me started to look deep into understanding why mythology and the story of our whole existence is being told to us just as if you were explaining to a child the birds and the bees. It's like the maturity level of the humans haven't got high enough to the point where they can hear something and don't immediately become offended and walk off, and then cause chaos and stupidity all around the place before they realize that they've only done what they've always been doing. Living life through opposites. This is the deepest thing that you can come to the realization of is that our fear is our opposite. So what we have done is, whether it's if it's a man, he says, well, woman's my opposite, and that becomes because that's his fear. He's a fear of her taking over things, etc., or whatever. Then, or a man may say, well, God is my opposite, or one may say, God is my opposite, and then going to attack God and do things to God. And then someone can say, well, demon is my opposite, and then go to attack demons. I figured out that this is also the root of why we have so many different cups, but they're all still a cup. We have so many different couches, but they're all still couches. We have so many different kind of computers, but they're all still computers. We have so much variety, and it basically gets us to a level where we get lost. I want everyone to hold on for a quick second for me. I'm going to need to mute something here. Okay, sorry about that distraction. Okay, so I really wanted to explain to people that now you have to know that there's a difference between the knowledge of life versus the knowledge of good and evil. You cannot have but one or the other at a time. That's why these were the two trees that were set up. Some people try to take both of the trees at the same time, and it doesn't work. Here's why. Because if you want to know the story to life, and you start seeing all of this evil stuff going on, and these beings and these grander beings that are doing certain things, and after a while, you won't be able to learn too much more about life before you just start learning the knowledge of good and evil. You paused on the knowledge of life, and you're now at the knowledge of good and evil. That was a tree that we were never supposed to eat from. Because it starts to create opposites, and from that point we get split. And so man and woman were split in consciousness before they ever became split on a planet in a fleshly mode. The moon was masculine and feminine. But there are other planets that always remain masculine and feminine, but you have to understand what I call planetary knowledge. Planetary knowledge is that if a planet is a female, positive, then it has a masculine negative as its opposite or its powering component. If it is positive masculine, then it has a negative feminine as its component. That's power. So when this knowledge was found out, because the first celestial body in our position is the moon, people began to take sides of what side they were going to be on the moon. So when you ask, what is a real dark sider? It's a person who rides with the dark side of the moon. The 3 days of darkness that people like Blair talked about, people they're talking about it's supposed to happen on a worldwide scale and everyone's going to see it on a physical level. It happens every month. It's the days that you cannot see the moon. So those who choose to practice in that area, which is actually an area of invisibility, as we talked about the Masonic lodges being configured for the dark side of the moon so that they can go into these dimensions, then this would be for us now our opponent. Now, again, we are talking about opposites here. So once you begin to engage in this game of vampire versus hero or hero versus serpent and all of these things, you have to be very clear about how you're making your incisions, because you're still acting on something organic, meaning that even how you treat people, the feelings you give them, all of that's you're acting out on the total spirit of this world when you do that still. So you have to be very careful of what you're doing. This great level of imbalance that we're experiencing is causing us to lash out on one another, have disagreements with one another, not get along with one another, etc. And then it will continue as long as we let it, because we have now the opportunity to seize and balance a major part of what we are supposed to be as humanity a solution for, which is the age-old imbalance of when what we're calling the universal mother decided to take the seed and then not utilize the father anymore from that point. And I will explain this. Now remember, when a seed is planted, you no longer need the original fecundator of that seed, because once that seed sprouts and starts to grow and then it makes a plant or a baby or whatever, that one then can make more. So it's important for you to get that clear. If the seeds only needed one time and then the original seed, and then from that the clones can be made, because the clones push out the seeds. But the only drawback is that, well, actually there's no drawback at all, but you still have to understand when the seed mixes with something, whatever it's mixing with, what's going to come out is going to be half the original seed and half this new component. And that new component, for many of us, became the planet we now know as Venus. Some people will be like, well, what do you mean? What are you saying? Now, I 100% believe that there's more wombs than just Venus. But I can see clearly through the mathematics and through all of the knowledge that has been brought forth to this world up until this point, that there is the connection between Venus and this planet. Some people say that connection starts at Sirius. But we can take it from Venus. The Venus and its pentagram nature. If you look all throughout history, you will see the 5-pointed star related to the planet Venus and the 5 points that it traces out on the night sky in an 8-star procession. Okay? And so this means that Venus becomes the component for life and death for this planet, because that's what the symbol 8 means. Death and regeneration. Death and regeneration. And this regenerative principle is actually what they call Re, which is not the sun, but Venus. So, if you look at the flowers, if you look at the papayas, if you look at all of the different things that have this pentagram shape in it, ending in the human pentagrammal shape, this means that as far as the production of the vehicles are concerned, the ships, whether it be a papaya, whether it be a flower, whether it be a human, this is the actual womb it's coming out of. Now, of course, there's many things on this planet that seem to be coming out of a hexagonal womb. But this was how we were going to trace the origins of the 7 mothers, as they call themselves, the 7 wombs. And that's why there was a major conflict that went on between certain celestial bodies that are just called angels against the wombs. And this is what also ultimately led to the moon not being in balance with the sun, which they both had the same balance at first, but one struck the other and took away a great deal of its power. And I will explain this to you. Now, they say that the 14 pieces of Osiris correspond to the 14 pieces of that Osiris was broken apart, correspond to the 14 days of the moon. So what literally happens is, or the 28 days of the moon, 14 times divided by 2, in which there's a day cycle and a night cycle. What they're actually revealing is the knowledge of how the moon becomes what we talked about, basically a hack, if you want to use that term, for all the celestial energies that are coming to us. That each day, and this is why they divide the days of the week up into 7 days, because 7 plus 7 is 14, 14 is 28, 28 perfect days of the moon, and 28 days in a woman's menstruation cycle. This also shows why, or 28 days in the actual time in which the menstruation cycle begins, ends and takes place. On top of that, the word menstruation contains the word men in it, because men was the fertility god, which Pablo's going to show here on livestream.com/understanding. The men who was known as the Egyptian god, it just shows his phallus. So the major component of the moon was not actually feminine. That's why it was shown as a crescent moon, because those crescents were horns. It was masculine and feminine, but as far as the moon cycle, it was negative masculine with a feminine positive counterpart before, when it was in its original condition. And if you want to deny this, then you need to ask, why is it called the moon, which is the same tone that a cow makes? And why is it that when humans come to this planet, they are suckled with milk? And why is it that the first currency that was ever put about in this world, the first current, was the trade of cattle? And so what we find is we find that this symbolism of the horn god is not so much leaning towards that there were horns on everyone versus that they had been components of the moon, the original beings here. However, when the body of Osiris was broken apart, the penis was what was lost. The actual fecundating component somehow was pulled out of the whole clock of Earth. Now, what does Jacob Lorber say? He says that the moon was once a part of the Earth, and then it somehow either left or was removed or whatever you want to make the story, but now it sits out there and it yearns to be back here. And because we're caught in between its yearning, the cycles in which we roll here on this planet are governed by the moon, because we're in between it. So what we started to discover is that that's where people wanted to say, well, where is the father? Where is the snake, the serpent? Because the father of this planet was Saturn, was Set. And the reason why everyone knows this is because when they go back to Ethiopia, the root of everything, they see the dark melanated Set, Naga, they say, there on the throne as Sar Nagus. So from that point, ultimately you would see in the great cycle of time, or what they're calling the Great Leviathan, which is the great sea monster. This is what they're calling our universe, a giant sea beast. That in its complete circle, what it actually does is it brings itself back to where you would have a dark melanated beginning and then an almost non-melanated white end. And so the being that we're seeing as the old white man is actually the old black man in there. But he's run through the complete cycles of time like they were showing on Dr. Parnassus. He's been making choices after choices, and his soul is immortal. He can just keep coming back. But this is because of the things that have gone on with the children, and this is the secret mystery behind Gnosticism. That Gnosticisms and Gnostics already know about what's going to happen to this world, not Catholics and Christians. Because the Catholics and Christians deviated from the plan when Yahweh was basically pissed off that nobody would worship. He wanted everyone to worship him as the creator. But there had already been so many higher beings before he got here that most of the people were still tapped into them. And thus it took by sword, which is the meaning of the cross, and crossing over people. And many different, or what they call a third of the host that work for this being to subdue all of the universe to get them to bow down. But it's not even happening. It's not working. Now, I'll give you another secret. The reason why it's not working is because this being can only boast about doing this. It can't actually do it. Who still controls things, they call it Kali. Kali means time. They're showing that for just this planet, not everywhere, but time controls things because it eventually consumes all things. So when they're showing this horrible picture of Kali that everyone's afraid of, and everyone's, oh my goodness, you're talking about this stuff, it's too much for me. These pictures mean, do you know how many beings have left this planet, what force do you think that is holding them and then regrouping them and churning them out again? It is a womb. It has so much room inside of it. It's not quenched, and that's why they always show her that she's dripping with blood. The ancients weren't really good at making the symbolism sometimes, or maybe they were, because they held through time. But it looks like it's just bloodthirsty, because time is swallowing everything that is in its path after a certain point. And so they drew that image, and they drew it like that because they wanted people to know, escape time, but know that it's a mother. Because she is the one that decides how much time that you have. That's what people are about to see. How much time you have to figure all this out while you're still fighting and warring with all these different people and even me and all sorts of stuff going on, animosity, spite. Earth and the universe and all the rest of these beings, they know how to deal with the situations that we're going through right now. Because the situation that we're going through, and not to get off topic here, but the situation that we're going through has a lot to do with the imbalance of our universe. And that imbalance is coming because many of the different beings that are in front of us now, masquerading as if they're the mother, masquerading as if they're the father, are no more than the children. Now, the children have become very powerful because the first ones to cross over still crossed over into being all-powerful as they were, but still imbalanced. And many of them chose to become worshipped as gods. It talks about this many times in the Aztec annuals. This is stuff that just really recently happened when you look at the timeline. The Aztecs felt it was necessary to sacrifice 20,000 people per day to balance, not per day, per ritual, which took place sometimes at least once a month, sometimes twice, just to balance the universe. If they think it's their responsibility to balance the universe then you cannot expect the beings that you're going to be meeting after you so-called balance the universe are going to be balanced beings, because that's what they were catering to. Any time a person goes into deep levels of division where you're willing to cross and stab your own people, especially in the back, then that's when you're looking at the crossover. So the world has been in this stage, and few people have been able to even approach this from this level. Most people choose not to say anything. They're trying to protect their reputation. Someone was asking me the other day, why it had not been organized to a level where we could at least afford to even maneuver with the resistance. And I said, because the resistance is almost like a job that nobody wants. So the people leave all the time. They work for a little bit, then it becomes too much for them, or they gain a lot, and then they go off to something else. But I've been consistently on this to find out what was really happening here for us. Because, like I said, you can see, and I'll copy over my notes of what we're supposed to be talking about on today's show, you can see with all of this going on why, for one reason or another on this list, someone chooses just to check out. Because of the opposites they choose to check out, because of them finding out that they're related to many of these beings that they're having a problem with, they choose to check out. Because they're still holier than thou, as they're pretending, they choose to check out. Because they've somehow grabbed the moon key, or the ibis, or Thoth, or the one who writes on the tablets and started to decipher what was there, then they can't sometimes continue with this. Because they are one of the imbalanced children, they can't sometimes continue with this. So you see, all man and woman have really done is create more reasons on why they can't get out of here. But I'm coming to tell you that I have the knowledge here now to get us out of here, but it's going to take us I can pull it all apart for you. I have all the knowledge, all the data, all the people that are ready to help and do this. We need your support, and not only that, do we need you to spread the message, because this is what it was supposed to be like. When we finally got to the truth, because many were brave, then they were going to try to cut off the actual channels, and people weren't going to believe anymore that there even existed truth. But I tell you today, it does. But you still have to remember that statement. The knowledge of life versus the knowledge of good and evil. Because remember, nature is a master of immortality. In the plants here and all the things that the universal mother is holding, she already understands how to solve one of our major fears, which is death. Not just death, like they talk about the first death, but the second death. Meaning that when you come into the plane, you're not spiritually equipped. You have no spiritual bearing at all. And then you're imagining that because you didn't work on this, that you're imagining that even if you didn't work on this, that you're going to go into some of these high planes and finally rest. That's not what's going to happen. The balance must be restored. That's the whole reason why we're here. Look at another thing. It's very, very simple. Why is it so necessary, even though me and you both know that there are other planets out there with life, why is it so necessary to tell us that there is no other planets with life? And even to go deeper and say, even deeper, why can it just be like 3? Like, even if they didn't want to say there was another planet out there, even if they didn't want to say that all the other planets out there, why not just give you some more options so that you can start saying, well, I'm just saving up 50,000 more space credits and then I'll be headed to Nipun 10, where I heard that they don't even use a government and they only grow organic, etc. So why is it that the controllers do not reveal any of the information about the other planets? The reason is because you have to understand that the planet is within you. Because the moment you start to look abroad, like even introducing to humanity a small, degenerated gray, got humanity thinking everything besides about what they're doing here on this planet about themselves. They're now all out in space, and we have the mathematics and the ancient knowledge of God. Look, if you say you have that and you're standing there talking to me about it, you're lying. Because anyone accessible to that kind of knowledge is definitely not on TV talking about it. The reality is that all man is doing is he's stealing, even woman is involved in this, stealing from nature and then introducing it to everyone as if it's their invention. I'll explain that again. The moment nature introduces something, all man and woman have done is take credit for it, even the gods and goddesses. Well, I did that because nature is continuing to function. It's giving the water, it's giving the fruit, it's giving all this stuff. But then there's other beings that are saying, well, I bought it, I got this to you. I shipped it here. You should be thankful for us. We're thanking this company today for feeding 5,000 people. Wait a minute. Why don't we start thanking who's giving the food to feed these people, the actual generator of it? And that's what I realized happened. That there were so many other beings that were not responsible for the positive side of what we're experiencing, and they were trying to take credit for it. We were giving the credit to the wrong people, the wrong beings. And it was taking a lot of our energy away. And when you're low on energy and you got parts missing, you can't even get rewired. They're actually attempting to rewire the human DNA to exclude the component that we know as the moon to see if that will possibly be the solution to the situation. They're getting desperate. People think that nobody's really working on this. That there are not people who would not, I'm just a spokesman, would not be talking about how they're going to fix the problem because they know how much time left that it takes that we have to fix this before the universe has no choice. Do you think that this planet Earth will go get all the way to the lowest point that it knows is its lowest point where it needs to regenerate again? Of course not. We're responsible for turning it around. If it doesn't happen, it's just another cycle. You should not expect that of her. Meaning that if it gets too bad, you should expect her to self-terminate this cycle. Because out of her pain of us not getting it right. Because there has already been a move, and that's why they say there was a big difference between the relationship that people had with the goddess before versus the relationship that is now being established. And this is why. Because in the old days, the powerful Amazons, the giant women, Column, the Columbian, these beings which are never talked about because they're the ones that are kept the most secret. They always talk about the Nephilim Rephiim as the female male giants, the actual male giants, but do they talk about the female giants? No. Did you think that there was not female giants, seeing that still what comes from woman Vesica is a male and a female? So of course, there were females. But they keep them hidden, and that becomes the secret of Columbia. That becomes the secret to why the United States has that Statue of Liberty out there. That becomes the secret to why the Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. That becomes the secret of why they're worshiping the owl goddess, Nama, who's also Lilith, not Moloch, out there in the woods. And that becomes the secret to why all of what the United States is doing is in Cali or California. They've been acting out in Hollywood or Hollywood their magic of Beliar, who's known as the Prince, or is he the Fresh Prince of Beliar or Belair, which is the rich area that's in Hollywood. So they've been acting out where the sun may rise in the east, but it sets in a funny location. They're acting out the cult of death, and they spread that through the Aztecs and the Asiatics around the world because that mother suckles her kin with poison. And that's what United States fed us. And that's why also this requires us to really, really get back in there on mom and help her make that transition. Because when people start to hate America or hate Russia or hate Africa, like they have Obama up there now acting like he's representing all African American and melanin dominant people, and they just hate him because purposely he keeps making mistakes. And then people are associating all of those people of that color with that. This is the madness going on and being produced in Nazi land. Because the Nazis had already taken over and subdued America, and this is knowledge that everyone knows now. They just don't know what to do about it. And that's why they keep talking and talking. And I'm telling you what you can do about it. You can turn your power on by uniting with what's universal. What that does is that you would be surprised how many beings came here through Earth and were really, really, really powerful when in their younger stage, though. Imagine you 50 parsecs from now and where you're really at in your consciousness. So 50 parsecs of knowledge does a certain thing, and that's who the universal mother has on her side, because at any point she can just call in a favor and say, hey, and you just send out whatever the communication is. There's some beings here that are just not learning, or here's one of ours, and there's some things threatening him. Could you just lighten that up really fast for me? People understand now you will have to defend the mother. That will be your task and your duty here. You will have to show women the negative side of woman, the Nama, the Lilith, Nahima, the red dress, the red queen. You will have to show her male by only example in order to not end up being destroyed by her, which is actually the negative aspect of the feminine, the Kali, the one that comes to destroy. When Earth is finally pissed off about what's happening and not soothed, it brings out another side. So this is what people need to understand is happening and taking place, because there is a setup that we have. And I want you to visualize this in your mind. It is a setup where you have a positive male and a negative male. This is woman and man alike. You have a positive male and a negative male, a positive female and a negative female. And those stand on the side of you, and then you stand in the middle, and that makes 5. That becomes the beginning of your whole setup. So if you choose to magnify negative male and negative female for whatever reason, then you start to become partial to whatever node that is on the moon. So those who start to only magnify the negative side of themselves, they start to become dark-siders, and they're governed by the dark side of the moon and the goddesses and the angels in which correspond to that. Okay? So what also happens is a person needs to understand that with this positive and the negative side, masculine and feminine, because we are originally and are now androgynous beings, you can can do things as a negative male that have exact equivalence to the positive female. The negative female, and I will explain. Generally, the negative female is somehow caught in a conundrum in which she must con or use her body or use several different things to attract the male to get him to do what she wants him to do. That is a negative female aspect. The negative male will go and start to take some type of drug or white powder and go and push it to the mothers and the energy, the sister, the brother, the universe, and will start to prostitute himself to the dark side of things. These are the same actions. So I can write a whole book about how the negative male and the negative female are the exact same as far as the choices that they're given. So when you start to do things on the positive side of your aspect, what you will see, regardless of what anyone wants to tell you, is the reason why the moon is so crazy is if a person's off balance and on the dark side of it. If they're in their energy balanced more towards the light side of it, then when the energy starts coming off, it won't equal negative things happening for you. This becomes very important. This also becomes why most people never even get closer to the higher beings, because it will only destroy them. I'll explain it very simply. If you go close to the beings, the ones that are sending all the energy, the higher ones, this is when you start to read, this is when you start to learn the ancient knowledge, you start to really, really dedicate yourself to it, truthfully, not playing around. When you start to do this, you're actually drawing closer to them. Your light is starting to become a part of their light because you keep sending the signal, you keep sending the signal. So what they say is the danger of this is that the more you come closer to those forces, the more they're even paying attention to what you're doing. We're not going to say they're not paying attention to everything, but let's just say if you come closer, then you're a bigger piece to what is supposed to be allowing the world to change into higher levels of consciousness. You're a bigger piece of what is supposed to be the energy that's pervading across the dimension. You become that bigger piece. And when that happens, they're more concerned about what you do. So this is where you have to really be flexible because the energy of the earth is always changing. So you have to be truly ready to change your position on things as you begin to learn more and more about what's really happening here. Or some have chosen not to take that path. Some have chosen to continuously see all the lessons that are here, but not learn from them. To just judge everyone. He's not doing it right. He's not saying it right. She's not doing it right. She's not doing it right. Creating a world of opposites. And if you really saw this world, when you look down on it, all you would see is regeneration and reproduction. You would see why the serpent is used as a reproduction symbol. And that's for the simple fact, like everyone that's scared of the serpent and they were worshiping serpents. Okay, now you understand where that's coming from. They're worshiping the snake under the symbol of the Father because they know that the actual component to the Father is the penis. And the penis looks like a snake. They worship the woman under the symbol of the triangle. That's why she's the triple goddess. Because when you look at her vagina, it looks like 3 points there. And then there is even another geometry in the center of that, and that's why they were saying, well, there becomes this huge mystery about the Vesica because it contains other geometry around it. And so that's where that knowledge ends up going. It goes very vast into the multiple portals of creation and how the whole generation process is, which most people are not even ready to approach. Because, just like we were talking about almost in the first episode that I ever came on this radio, and I asked everyone, was humanity really ready to meet these so-called extraterrestrials? Now, let's get it straight. Alien just means you don't know them. I'll say that again. Alien just means you don't know them. So they're aliens to you and foreign to you. So we asked humanity in the beginning, were they really ready to meet this extraterrestrial? Which is none other than their father, universal fathers and mothers, not the children. So I'm going to take a break here for a moment. We're about 45 minutes in. This is a show scheduled for an hour and a half. When we come back, we'll get into a little bit more of the symbolism. We'll also talk about the Semites and the Sims. As they say, there's a game called The Sims. You can live this virtual life. What the word Semite really means. We'll talk about Moses and his experience with the burning bush or the acacia bush. We'll talk about what the horns meant. We'll talk about the solar symbols being confused as the lunar symbols being confused as solar symbols, and we'll get into things of that nature for those that can handle it. Everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Esoteric Radio. This is now the second half, and for everyone that would like to look at this on live stream as far as the pictures and things that we're actually showing, you can go to www.livestream.com/understanding, and you can look at the images that are being shown in relation to today's show. I also wanted to give everyone the opportunity to call in. If you did have a question, the number to call in is area code 347-996-5688, and that'll give you a chance to. One of the major questions I think people should be asking right now is, where am I in all this? Because each of us have, under this skin, a different geometry. And that's definitely the tune I wanted to come back and tell everyone about is the great news, which is, one, it's obviously that a currency here on this planet is starting to have trouble. Just a particular current is starting to have trouble. We've always been taken care of by another current. And this is where I really wanted to talk about some of the people who have been perpetrating, and that's why it's caused us to have such pain. These are companies like Monsanto. These are companies that have basically taken the fecundating component. I just like to call this the seed. They've taken that component and they've abused it. And that's also where a lot of the pain continues with the negative aspect of the feminine, because if she does gander out at times and approach the male, that we should always be concerned about exactly what picture we're conveying. When we're talking about the positive aspects of our life that we have to tap into to balance ourselves now, we have to look very closely at what we're doing to the people that are around us. Surely we should know by now that we will be mad to think that we were somehow going to go somewhere without our mother, our father, our little brothers, our cousins, that kind of connection. And then when you start to really look at how we're all connected, you see us as one very large family. And it's almost like if you have like a brother that is handicapped for some reason, you don't just discard him. But because there are certain races that have been handicapped, then we find that our world has discarded many races, and none of these problems have gone anywhere. And that is the major pain that is fueling the rage behind the destruction. If there was to be destruction coming. But as humanity, we have an opportunity to soothe it. It's almost like pouring foam over it. You have an opportunity to do that so that it does not burst to something that we are not prepared for, because that's what the major message that was sent by a lot of these advanced beings was, that they were only really concerned about a couple things, and that's when humanity got to this certain timeline, whether they were going to be prepared to transcend into their next dimensional state. If you notice that how that many of these factions have been perpetrating the feminine, like if you look at McDonald's, they've taken the M or the breast, and they've taken the beef You notice what they're using, because we're heavily related to the cow, like we were explaining earlier. And then they just cook up the beef, just thousands and thousands and thousands of cattle they burn up, and then they feed to people. Like, people have to realize that that is the darker side of things that are just continuing. Look at how Monsanto interjects itself into the world's food supply and starts to actually take away the seeds of the food. It was just recently a peach here in Costa Rica. We opened the peach up and the seed had already exploded within it. It was marked that it came from the United States, but I can see what they're feeding there. And my concern has grown so great for the U.S., because I have people in deep connections into the United States, that it's forced me to look so much more deeper into what can solve the problem. And this has happened in like 2 weeks, that I've literally felt so much energy and so much change on the planet, and it was magnifying itself everywhere. This was of the destructive aspects of the feminine, with like the songs like Beyonce with all the single ladies. And then from that point, them crowning the Layla as the universal, or what they call was that Miss Universe? Yeah, they crown her Miss Universe, and then they choose to use that name. And just how right at that same time I was discovering that the United States was pushing the negative side of the feminine aspect, and that's why they were at war with the ancient positive side of the feminine aspect, which still was yet to be revealed. If people noticed that when Saddam Hussein was about to go and open up the gates of Nana in Saudi Arabia, or the seat of Babylon, or the seat of Ba, which basically means soul, when he was about to open that up, the U.S. moved in. However, it's highly possible that whatever he was even about to do with it wasn't, well, it's not so much as it's highly possible. We know what happened. It didn't happen. He wasn't able to open it up. So that obviously meant that he was not the one to open it up. And he tried to make himself as if he was like Nimrod. So we understand Nimrod's attitude at that point, where he was pushing in civilization, was not what the Universal Mother really wanted. So it's still the people that are supposed to handle this problem are you. It's inside of you. It's like when this message continues to broadcast, and it'll go far, and people will one day listen to this, it will even maybe now awake certain individuals to what they know. And then that is what we're talking about. Like, I've been feeling this energy all week. I've been having to really, really just calm down and sit still, even to broadcast and do a show, or be able to compress this knowledge that I found out just through so many different levels, all into somewhat of a speech and telling people, because the energy itself is just immense, because you could feel what you need to feel. Because what we have to do is we have to be able to radiate this energy to the people that are around us, so that it washes over them. There's only a few components here on this dimension that even contain that kind of power. And if you wanted to ever plug into it, I can show you 100% through a fractal what it would be. When you're in the womb, if you enter the womb, the portal closes behind you. It just goes. Now you have your light, so everything that you can see is there before you, and that is your experience. If for some reason you wanted to exit it, just for whatever reason, you would have to go right back through that. And that's why you have to go right back through the entry. That would be the only way out. That's why they call it an ibis. Now, it's interesting because the ibis is actually the snake-eating bird. It's like this very aggressive with eating snakes. And they were saying that the reason why the messengers were given that depiction, if you want to know the real depiction of symbolism, is because when leaving here, one had to go through the underworld. And if that area is heavily populated with snakes, and some are poisonous, but because they all fear the ibis bird, or it's just probably eaten away, then you're on like a boat to the next dimension. They think that this stuff was all a myth. I come to tell humanity right now that from my whole experience in this whole spiritual sphere of what they've offered us here on planet Earth, it's more than real. If people don't understand, like when you look at the church and these people are saying hallelujah, hallelujah, if you look at the etymology of the word hallelujah, they say it means praise be to Yah, but it actually says that Hillel is Yah, meaning Hillel is God. So this means that the Catholic Church is running around screaming that the moon is God, the moon is God. And they've taken this fallacy, and this is also the symbolism behind the obelisk, because they say they just have the penis, the active penis or phallus of the originators. And they say it works. So when they put up an obelisk somewhere, they're just showing that just like they hold that rod in their hand with the jewel on the tip of it, that we have the function-dating component. If there's anyone, there's people actually, and not if there's anyone, but there's people that are out there that are also geared to neutralizing the spirits that are responsible for doing that. This is another level of what they were attempting to suppress, but now we can speak on a platform where it wouldn't be looked at as something that would be criminal. But the reality is that because there were controllers that were doing things in our reality, and they were doing negative things that were hurting this planet, that's where the planet actually calls upon many of us. It's like, hey, we know that you're very spiritually equipped, and we fed you, like since the beginning, your mother, that's us. We gave you all the fruit that you eat, the water you drink, and here it is all before you. Come back and let us know when you find out that it's the truth. Okay. So now that I know that it's the truth, we definitely have to really, really start working at cleaning up a lot of the mess that has been around here. But to do that, we have to be spiritually equipped. And I believe that this is one of the only forums that we can really even talk about stuff like this, because the two sometimes don't go together in most forums. But being spiritually equipped means that you do have another you. This is where the deepest lesson comes today. Now, there's one that when you move, it moves. That's what's called your shadow. It's learning from you. So even if you think that you've changed your mind, if your actions are that you didn't, then the shadow just learns from your actions. Because it's mine. It can't see your thoughts. So what we have to do, and this shadow has a lot to do with our opposite too, what we have to do is we have to teach our shadow, by example, what to do right. Because it even at times is on the other realm that we call the dream realm. When you're awake, it's still doing things. Like you'll notice that when you keep waking up to a certain world, there's things going on, you're fighting, you're hurting people, etc. This is still something going on with your other one. Then you'll notice when they start to go into pure levels of energy and pure levels of consciousness, their dreams change. That one starts to be around good things and starts to meet good things. This becomes your check to know whether or not you actually changed or whether you're still the same. Really make the action, and it's there for you. What we've seen in history is we've seen the gate open for humanity to go into something very of a higher nature than what they're doing now, which is not being able to solve the problem, into becoming the solution, not into getting away. One cannot even think of leaving this like this, the humility of leaving this planet, but still saying that you were a powerful being, leaving the planet in this condition. It was like you didn't even clean up your mess. And that was what the indigenous were very concerned about. They were always concerned about when they left the planet, they would leave no trace, really. Because they respected the planet enough to know that you could not take away from the garden. Because where would you get it? You could not give to we couldn't give to the garden, because where would you get it? You could not take away from the garden. So it was left to be made pristine, and we messed that up. Like people think that, well, no, it's all, we did something here that we have to fix, and I don't want to leave until it's fixed. And so that's where you begin to activate this inner side of you that is strong. Because remember, if you notice with the dream person, they still seem to be very equipped at dealing with that realm. They can fly and they can do other things. Maybe not all the time, especially when they get plunged into mire because of your physical actions on the dimension, but they have a lot of potential. They talk about the twin flame. Come on, it's right there. It's all you got. Like some people really, if you think about it, this world versus their dream, it has way more content there, but get control of it. That's why you have your own spleen. I have my own spleen. That's a planet. It belongs to you, but take it back over. Don't think that something has not invaded your planet. This is what the health and the internal health is really all about, because that's how they manifest on that level of the practice. It's like if they can't get you through the front door, they'll attempt to get you through the back door with the food. Now, who is they? I guess I would like to get to that before this is over. I just call it less. It's the idea that there will not be enough. Didn't they say that that was like the hardcore reptilian trait? The idea that there somehow wasn't enough. And so then it's starting to hoard it and starting to keep it. And then that causes basically wars and all sorts of stuff. There's not enough land. I got to take the land from my people. And then, I got to accumulate as much as money as possible, because once whoever has the most, that's going to be the most powerful. And then so the world's gone headlong into that. But who's really back there? We find less means L, which just means God, SS, two serpents. So, if people actually believe, if you look at Conan's staff, he's just got two serpents up there. If people actually believe, like a Kalesh's rod, there's just two serpents, that somehow those two serpents are not up to something, after all of what we have discovered, that's what if people ask me now, well, what was the benefit of everything that you had learned before you came into the highest level of truth available in your planetary system, sir? And I would say, well, the reality is that I looked at everything only to realize that I was looking at myself. Now it was like the first level of the grand epiphany. And then I noticed how I was acting every single day, especially when I started to move into a higher vibration, was somehow manifesting in front of me as some type of synchronicity. And then I started to watch those synchronicities, and I pulled another message out of them, and it gave me a code. When I started looking into that code, I realized that I could find the truth to everything in the reality as long as I was willing to accept it. And that many people had actually come into the truth before and didn't accept it because they still wanted to do them, whatever that is. I realized it must have something to do with a shadow or a phantom, like they call it, a phantom DNA, that needed to learn something, and because it was deprived of learning something, it got us in the same position of what we don't like to be done to us. We don't like to not have information. We don't like not to be progressing forward. We don't like not to be exposed to all the grand things that we get sometimes in just a hint in a moment in our lives. But it's like that too. So the best thing to do is to show it. And this is going to be the new thing. What you're going to see is you're going to see people that have massive amounts of things contributing it to the world. People are going to work to see how creative they can get at restoring this planet. Watch what I say, because it's not just me behind here. The reality of our whole existence has been correcting the imbalance. It gets so bad sometimes. Like, I've been a real living product of how you have to be able to go through all the knowledge and still emerge. Like, I found it. The universal energy source. Pure energy for everyone. Absolutely free. As soon as the currency fails, it's no problem. Simply plug into the universal mother and you'll have energy from there. Your food won't rot. You won't age. You'll clean up your dirt that you left, your plastics that you threw out. You'll balance out and you'll float like air. And that will be when you start to be drawn closer and closer to something that's just simply immense levels of energy. And we're just hoping this time that we can actually grasp more of that before we start to assume that we're ready to go out into the great beyond. Because I know many of us here have gone into the higher states of consciousness, and that has allowed us to see a moment of what it's like. Some have been a lot longer and fell away from it, still not wondering how to turn it back on, imagining that's one thing or another. But what's mainly interesting is during this time, it works for us to have this relief. And that's what I wanted to say to everyone today. I'm going to give an opportunity for individuals who want to call in, or if anyone has any questions in the chat box, then they can ask those questions. What I did want to say also is that I'm going to be pulling this apart into a whole different level. I wouldn't even, today's a really good reference point, but I wouldn't even use today as a criteria to exactly how things are going to be coming out in the future as far as how we can develop people understanding this. Like, I'm just explaining it. I went through a lot to explain it, but visually, mentally, physically, all of these different levels, we are going to be showing people how this is the absolute truth. I'm going to answer a couple questions here. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of this we talked about. Okay, I wanted to also talk about this Semite tribe. People have to understand that when you look at the roots of humanity, you do look at it like a tree. And there's a large group of people that were, like if you look in the Latin countries, they were definitely part of the Aztec Empire. If you look into the French, we're going to put some stuff out about the French and show how far back the lineage goes, showing where key points happen where humanity is making these decisions that are actually steering their course. But in the back, you can still see the original situation on this planet, which was somewhat of what the Gnostics call an error, which is also a segment of time, but it's when a group of unbalanced beings start to be born because the way in which they're produced was only using the phallus component minus the body, the rest of what comes with what male really is. Now, it's interesting. We've definitely been able to identify the universal mother, the identity of the universal father completely, the one that stems all the way back just as far as the universal mother, is still yet unknown. They say that if you meet one who is not born of woman, then you've met your father. What they mean in this Gnostic text is that there was a being that did drop the original seed. That origin of that being is still, the full origin is still a mystery somewhat. So I see that there's actually no questions here. There's about 13 more minutes remaining in the call. I want this to be time for us to talk about some of the things that are going to be going on in the resistance, some of the changes going on. Basically, as you see, we've opened up the Holders Foundation, which is a universal bridge. We did just recently put out a book. It's called The Universal Mother, and we actually sourced that book. It's an excellent work by Gnostics to get all of what I'm explaining, which you still have to look at it several times under your cap so that you understand exactly how this dimension is laid out. Some are here even just somehow they are here to just have the feeling that they have more life to them. It's interesting because they're beings that are so ancient and old. They've been through many different cycles, some greater than this, some less than this. So sometimes they're searching for this information because it gives light back to them. It's important that one look deep into the truth that's happened on the planet and not neglect in our everyday life who is really actually giving us, who is actually really, who is actually really giving us sustenance. So, So that's going to be it for today's show, and I do want to let everyone else know I'm going to let Luis do this. It's just a phenomenal project that we have going on where people are going to explain when consciousness came to them what exactly they were doing or how they were in their life. And we believe that this is going to get a lot of us to talk about things that we haven't exactly talked about in front of other people because of not knowing that we're all living very similar lives. It's like anyone who's really sincerely been involved in this has dug through all of this work that we're presenting, and some have already come into the levels of the knowledge and are still wondering what to do. That's because that many of us are supposed to now link up. Like now more than ever, what we've been doing is we've been linking up on a physical level, not just on a virtual level. Some people are already headed down here also to Costa Rica. We definitely want to get ready to secure a larger facility so that more of us can start to hear the energy. What we noticed also in smaller rooms, when people that had very charged auras were in those rooms, you saw a lot of colliding particles. And I started to get deeper into understanding what that exactly was about. And I realized that part of us that's like a fire, that spirit part of us needs to be ignited at times. And it's funny how many different levels this works on, because it's like when you have people around you that are motivating you and basically showing you yourself through them. You have like a live mirror, for better lack of words, and that basically allows us to be able to really be able to catalyze ourselves. And so understand also, if you're out there and you're looking for the organization, or you're looking for the collection, or you're looking for the communion, or you're looking for whatever you want to call it, the wholeness, know that there's a living, breathing component to that here. And so I want to say wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Esoteric Radio. Also, at the end of this call, actually there is a caller in the queue, but at the end of this call, if you press 1, it helps us out a lot as far as ranking the show up on Blog Talk Radio. I'm going to take this caller. It's coming from area code 202. Caller, you're on the line with Esoteric Radio.
Hello, this is James Spade. You hear the nervous system in my throat. It's because I know that this opportunity right now is not something I take lightly, I take for granted. Whenever I have questions about anything, I get the answers, and it's like they come in like slight notions, right? Mm-hmm. So what I find difficult for me with the ability to process high levels of information, I keep wanting to go back to what I know firmly. I listen to a lot of what you say, and it's what I live. So it's like what you say is already qualified. I've either lived it or I'm living it, right? And I don't even say wow anymore, because I'm pursuing understanding. So my question is, for a person like myself, should I maintain? Like, should I try to sift through what I want to keep with me as I continue on my path? Or should I just embrace, like, just full change, just outright, as things change, like, just fully adapt totally? Like, I'm having a problem with knowing what to remain firm in and knowing when to change, like when to throttle up and when to throttle down. Does that make that clear?
Yeah, I mean, you make it very clear. I mean, the reality is that that's sometimes just how scattered our thoughts are, because we've created so many options and so many things to do. It's like, how can we do something that we already are? So it's almost like we start to collide against ourselves. The main thing, though, is that if that's happening, though, there's a reason why that's happening, and that's more connected to there's some type of piece missing. You see, and so it's also like clockwork, what's going on with our psyche and our mind and our body and our soul. And if something is missing, then it starts to not function. It functions off balance. So I started to look deeply at where this off balance was coming from, and it just really came very simple. It was because of the opposites. It was because that whatever we make our opposite, we start to go to war against, and this starts a chain reaction. So regardless of all of what that component may be, we're still doing it. And that's where the higher they're like, whatever your whole long story is about what happened and who did it and who's at fault and what we're going to do in the future, it doesn't matter. You're still doing it. And that's what it came across with. But when you cease to do that, that's when you are now ready to start your next level. Because that you're still learning, though. Like, if they don't want to, that's why I'm saying we do a lot of this to each other. When it's time to actually adjust into where we're supposed to be, we let the other people that are around us, and you can imagine, even for me, I have a whole 4,000 people to also, for me to think about what exactly I want to say and what I'm going to do in order to make sure those people get to what they need to get to. But that also becomes where it's not just me determining that. Many people have very high beings that they're connected to that they chose to use the resistance as a portal to help them at a certain stage in their growth. And that's where but as it's moving, though, it's not like, David Icke still talking about reptiles. It's ever moving, ever evolving. Okay, here's what we see, because we're actually in it.
Right,
you know what I mean?
see it. Like
people kind of take themselves out of the thing and like, well, this is what I would do if I was dealing with something like that. Hello, you are dealing with something like that. Let's come back into this, and what are you going to do? And if you're one that is searching for answers, then you have to go ask your parents. But this type of thing is not as easy as I thought it was going to be, and that's a part of our pain. Our pain is because our mothers weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, but they did good enough. You see, they did good enough. Like, I don't know, it's just like we all have stuff to fess up to deal with. Don't think our mothers and fathers don't have that same thing, because that's why this is like it is. Like I said, one comes before the other. If we're now willing to admit that we weren't the first ones, that also means that we don't have to be taking a bulk of the guilt of what actually happened. We can start to fix it, because we know that if it's their problem, it's our problem. Right. That's where I started to look deeper into it, and I started to understand that many of the beings that were here to deal with the situation are encaged in these pins, these pentagram type bodies, limiting their potential. Because what it is the soul is pure fire, and then you put a bag of water around it, you have now steam, but it's still not going to be as powerful as it was when it was fire. And that's why you see the Qigong and the Kundalini, they actually can ignite things from the hand.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
In the morning, I take on a lot of different techniques. And one thing with the breathing, before I heard you say it, just holding my breath, like I will hold my breath and kind of compress, like a full lung breath, take it in, and then I guess push it down into my core to make sure that I can feel it in my core. And then when I release that breath, it's like predictable. The energy comes up, and I can feel myself rocking. Like I fell over one time. I laughed because it was a great feeling, but I just didn't understand it. So I'm hesitant to take two breaths and do it. You know what I mean? But it's definitely something not remarkable, but it's clear. It's like clear. Like, this is not ordinary. But I find myself doing it before I go out into the world, because it seems to clear out my mind. It makes me feel good. So I just wanted some clarity on that.
I mean, that's awesome. I mean, there's different levels to the activation of the body, and there's definitely a swaying back and forth that people begin to feel as they start to build up the current in their body, especially if they're sitting down. It's almost like you're a torrent or a pendulum even. Right. And it's interesting to see. I still ultimately found out that when blinking into higher states of consciousness, there was a certain amount of time that you could remain there before you would come back here. And a lot of people have definitely documented that. And then I went one level beyond that, because I found out that's what it means when they show in the ancient writings the keys. Because they're talking about the keys to gates that you can get to beyond that 15 minutes, basically, or that time that you're allotted outside of yourself. And
is that the goal? Should you try to?
I think the first thing is, because we have about 2 minutes left here, I think the first thing is to get fully identified with where one is. Like, I think that there was never an idea to just run off and leave Earth like we just left it. Like because that was something that we did. And no matter if we were encouraged to do that or whatever the story is, that would definitely be the same story as everyone else. To not make that your story, one can actually start to repair this Earth rapidly. And when they take that as a mission, then they receive the actual key to that's what you're feeling. It's like basically, which is about a fear and a release of fear. Like the key can release the fear, because the fear comes of, well, if I take another breath, what will really happen? And so that's just like when you're laying down and you start to feel your body shutting down and you're actually awake to see the whole process of when you're about to come out of the body. And you're like, if you're too awake and you feel that, you're like, whoa, something's sucking my breath, something's trying to suck my breath. And that's not really what's happening. You're actually shutting down and going into a lower frequency as far as the body is concerned, so that the soul can get out of it because it's of a higher frequency. This type of stuff was very expansive, and that's why the New Age had a really good field day with explaining it to everyone, but still never getting to the conclusion of it. The gate is conscious, that womb, because we're still in a womb. Like, that's what we can't forget. We're inside of the universe. It still has a conscious portal there, and to go through those, because they say they're fates, to go back through those, or be able to go in front of them, and even have the courage to go in front of them and say, is this now my time to pass through? Basically, have I showed myself to be approved? Because that comes in every single way we act every day, especially to our opposites. Remember that. Like, women have to remember that about man has to remember that about woman has to remember that about the demons, woman has to remember that about the gods. It's like, if you just allow it to start in your life, a person right now, because of how much energy is coming through, that would exhaust their energy. What they're encouraged that they would need to get out of here, that they would need to jettison. And when I mean get out of here, I mean you go up and then you come back down. And you go up and you come back down. Just like your energy is supposed to cycle, and then in that being you are, because you still have an existence here, your energy is intense. It's so intense that it can actually heal things. And that's what we're talking about.
Thank you, my
brother.
I appreciate that. I can't even say more than you know, because I know you know. I just appreciate it, for sure.
Man, I just appreciate being able to be here and translate some of it. I was a little... because there's so much stuff going through my mind, I wanted to make sure I cover certain things before I started to mention others. But in the next 2 weeks...
I hear you, and I receive it, so...
Okay, definitely, brother. And I wanted to... There's about 90 more seconds left in the call.
Do your thing,
I definitely wanted to thank you for calling in. No doubt, definitely.
All right.
Okay.
Hold it.
All right, and I definitely want to say thank you for everyone for tuning in today. We're going to be getting into this a little bit more. We're going to be taking it apart completely, but it's not just going to be an experience that people are having on the paper and reading. It's going to be an experience that they're having in their reality and in who they are, because that's what truth does. I thank you for tuning in to Esoteric Radio.